Gentlemen, if we can come to order here, please. We're very happy
Well, I
to
went, it turns out there was
welcome
nothing.
Forrest to us this morning. We're looking forward to hearing a bit about your life and what brought you to this august group. Welcome, Forrest.
October.
Yeah, welcome.
The October group now is.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Loan him a comb.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is
Mostly ladies.
Monday Morning Poet Society.
Dead poets.
Okay. Well, I'm feel honored to be asked to come and talk to you. It's always kind of hard to talk about yourself, as he said boastfully to the assembled masses. Well, I was born on May 4th, 1928. I graduated from high school, Walla Walla High School. I attended Washington State University for 2 years, transferred to Oregon State University. They were state colleges then. Finished at Oregon State College. I met my lovely wife in high school in Walla Walla. And we were married in 1950. And in June of 1952, I graduated from Oregon State with a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and a Business Administration and a Military Science minors. And I was commissioned as second lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force upon graduation. And I signed up for advanced ROTC so I could finish school before I had to go into service during the Korean War. My military experience, I was the longest assignment was at the Air Proving Ground Command at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. And I was officer in charge of communications and instrumentation for what they call the Gulf ranges. They were bombing and gunnery test ranges out in the Gulf of Mexico, but adjacent to the Florida shoreline along the Panhandle near Pensacola. And my job was to provide communications and instrumentation support for various tests. The highlight in my mind there was a record high altitude ejection from a B-47 bomber at 47,000 feet, and it set the record for the highest exit from an airplane and the longest free fall off the ground. And that was to test survival gear. It was the final test, so to speak. And it went off successfully. The colonel had jumped, or didn't jump out, but he was ejected through the lower ejection seat. They went downward for the pilots, and he came back to good health. But that's a long 47,000 feet. I forget what the actual distance of free fall before he opened his parachute, but it was, the larger part of that altitude was, it's a long ways to, a lot of time to think. Today we're doing lots of other interesting things, and I was in heaven, here I'm a second lieutenant. I got to participate in all this testing and observing it and so forth. That was my first and main military experience. After finishing my tour of duty, I was employed by Leeds and Northrop Company, which was a precision instrument controls group, and I was hired to be a specialist in providing instrumentation and controls to the power industry in Southern California, Southern Nevada, and so forth. And one landmark activity there that I was involved in was installing and starting up the first economic dispatch computer for electric power, and this computer would calculate where did you turn on your light switch. It would calculate which power plant to assign that to, considering transmission line losses and cost of generation from whether it was a gas-fired plant or a hydroelectric plant, things like that. So it was continuously solving that big equation to get the power, control the sourcing of the power generation. Then I made a change in my career to go to hired away from Leeds Northrop by the electronics division of the Ralph M. Parsons Company, and I was hired to be a salesman to get their product on the market. But then after I got there, I found out that this electronics division was run by a couple of aerospace engineers, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but they didn't know anything about selling industrial, even building industrial controls, and so forth for the, for the private sector industry. So I found that out. They didn't know anything about what they were trying to do until I got there. So I had a kind of a very good break. One of the things I was doing was trying to sell the electronics division to make and install control systems for a metallurgical plant at Anaconda Copper, a refinery, copper refinery. They were building a new building up in Montana, and my heart really wasn't in it because I knew that you had to have a working product ready to go to sell it to industrial clients, and these guys in the aerospace business, they were used to getting R&D contracts from some government agency, and then they'd do the R&D and develop the products and so forth. And they didn't have to go through the competitive marketing thing and having a product all ready to go. So one of the things I was supposed to do was to give Mr. Ralph M. Parsons, he was the sole proprietor of the company at that time, and he was back and forth from New York to Chicago, and I was back in New York working on this marketing campaign for Anaconda, and I was told he wanted to see me every morning for a status update. And I walked, I'd go into his office every morning and give him an update, and couldn't tell him anything very encouraging. So I was, after about 4 of those every morning sessions, I was walking. He excused me, and he my time to leave, I got up, walked across a long, expensive, about from here to the wall back there, floor from his desk to the office door, and I had my hand on the knob, and I started to open the door, and he says, "Just a minute, what do you think of your boss?" I said, "Whoop." So I very slowly closed the door, and I took my time walking back to his desk and not saying anything and thinking about what I was going to say. Sat down and said, I told him basically what the situation was. It's a long road to get into the commercial control work, and I don't think they're going to make it. So I went back to Los Angeles, came back to Los Angeles, and I went to my office in Monday morning in Pasadena, is where the electronics division was, and about noon, and a memo arrived at my desk. It says, well, there were, as of 2 weeks, in 2 weeks they were closing the electronics division, and I just changed jobs, got there, here I was out of work already. And then I got, the next day I got a call from one of the division managers of the engineering construction part of Parsons to ask me to come down and talk to him about moving to that part. I wasn't interested in that business. I hadn't developed any, so I went down but anyway, I met with him, and I thought it's better to have a job while I'm looking for another job than it is to be sitting at home diddling my resume. So I started the job, and I was assigned to an aerospace job. It was interfacing the Titan missile, Titan space launch system of the Air Force to a new launch complex down in Cape Canaveral that Parsons had the design contract to do. And I found out that I knew more about that just from a systems engineering standpoint and so forth than I did, as I thought I did. So I got into the groove at Parsons and had a very good, interesting career. I hardly ever saw Ralph Parsons again after that. But I know he had told this vice president to call me to, hang on to me. And I was the only one that made it into the organization. So the lesson there, I think, is be honest. Don't try to stab somebody in the back, but when the chips are down. And from that, I was put in charge of a small group of systems analysts and systems engineers who were doing a lot of this support work on facilities that Parsons was designing. And I actually formed a department called the Systems Engineering Department at Parsons, and that was on the equivalent level with the Electrical Engineering Department and so forth. They operated on a matrix style of organization where they would draw technical experts by their disciplines and put them together with project management engineers and so forth do the applications of the engineering. And made a pretty good system. So, then work began to taper off in that particular work with defense projects or aerospace projects, and I thought, what am I going to do with this group? And I got the idea that maybe we could put them to work in airport planning, because there was a big surge of airport expansions and so forth coming along. The Boeing 747 was, on the assembly line at Boeing. Very few airports were equipped to handle that size of an airplane. I thought, well, we could market a systems engineering approach to this airport planning and expansion work, and it worked out. It did pretty well. Became a major player in that line of engineering and construction, culminated by, I think, what the first really big job we got was expansion of Honolulu International Airport, the building of the reef runway, and we had people on that project for years and years. And then another one was expansion or the building of the brand new Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, which was a revolutionary design of the terminal complex. And we were just responsible for the terminal complex. And it had these semicircular buildings, and their selling point was that you could see a big board when you came in, or you, depending on what flight you're on, you could go park your car within 50 feet of the airplane gate and walk through this semicircular building, and very narrow cross section. Then all of a sudden, first hijacker made a successful hijacking of an airplane from somewhere in the United States to Cuba. I don't know if you remember that. Anyway, they took took everybody on the plane hostage and flew to Cuba, and that instantly made this close-in approach of just walking from the parking lot through the terminal building to the gate the airplane obsolete, because no way they could put security people at each of those things. It would be, just way too many people, too costly. So they had to do, while the building was under construction, had to do major revamp of the interiors and so forth, and change the whole concept of the airport. And there went the park by plane side business out the window. All of the major construction elements of these terminal buildings were prefab concrete, post-tension concrete big structures. They couldn't be changed, so they had to change the operating concept of the airport. Then I had several other really good successes in airport work. We were selected to do a feasibility study and site selection study for a new international airport for Hong Kong. I don't know if any of you have flown into Hong Kong, the old airport in Hong Kong, but you flew down between apartment buildings and you hoped that you were going to land on the runway soon enough before you went in the bay. But it was that was a very challenging project, because the site where the they wanted to put the airport was they had to take earth from materials, earth and rock from a big island, mountainous island, put it out there and build another little satellite island for the runway and the terminal, so forth, for the airport. And that brought in the need for some state-of-the-art construction methods, because where they were going to put the dirt that they brought in was very poor quality ocean floor with lots of organic material in it that had come down from the hills, mountains, and was, it doesn't make a good foundation because it keeps chemically, it's deteriorating and that sort of thing. This has been going on for centuries, I suppose. So when they put the fill in, they put in tubes with wicks of paper, like wick for a lantern, and then they surcharged the fill with about 10 feet of additional earth to push down, and then these wicks would take the water out and get it relatively dry down there, so that for a foundation for this material. I mean, they had dredged out a lot of the crummy stuff. But anyway, that worked, and the new airport is now in operation over there, I guess. I haven't been over to see the final result, but then I was appointed vice president of business development for the systems division at that time of Parsons, and I didn't get involved in the details of a lot of projects, and I was responsible for the getting the projects and negotiating the contracts, so forth. And one of them was got a lot of good publicity, was the development of a chemical weapons demilitarization plant concept for disposal of chemical weapons, shells and rockets, and mortars and things like that had been stored down at Johnson Island in the Pacific for years and years and years, since World War II. And they were beginning to rot and leak and so forth, so it became imperative that they destroy them. But you couldn't just blow them up because you'd release all the stuff, and you couldn't bury them because they were, so they we designed a highly automated plant that would take weapons apart in a very controlled environment and get any leakage of stuff into a furnace, and then all the parts would go into a high temperature furnace and be melted down and destroyed. Chemicals would all go through filters and post-treatment and be made safe to release into the atmosphere. So that ended up, we did plants for, there was one up in Hermiston, Oregon, and there was one up in Salt Lake City area, and one at Johnson Atoll, and then there was a fourth one, I think, but I don't remember where it was, back in Ohio or someplace. And that opened up new markets for Parsons for general rehabilitation of facilities and plants where they had been making atomic stuff. So they all had to be cleaned up, so that we got a lot of that business. Then they said, started traveling over to Saudi Arabia with in pursuit of a new international airport project for Jeddah, and made a lot of trips over there. We had several other projects underway over there, and would come back from those trips and I'd tell management, Parsons, that, you're not really, you've got to get more acquainted with the Saudi mentality and how they do business, and talk to them more. I kept saying that. Finally, they said, "Okay, if you're so damn smart, you go over there and do it." So I was made managing director of the existing joint venture we had with a Saudi businessman, and it's called Saudi Arabia Parsons. I went over there as the managing director of that. So I had the benefit of, instead of living in a compound with all company people, I lived in a villa office combination in Jeddah with villa on one side and the office on the other side. It was part of the Jeddah community rather than company town. We did have several of those compounds around different parts of Saudi Arabia for different projects. So, but that was a very enlightening experience. I got to learn a lot about the Saudis and their business practices and understand those differences in what we have. I think I got the job done.
Can you describe some of the differences?
Well, one of the things when they negotiate, sign a contract, they believe that the contract is still open for negotiation, and they think they want to change something. They say, well, just change it, just do it. And we'd have to, see if there was financial vulnerability or what have you in here, whether they were going to pay for these changes. That was always going on, and they would withhold our payment occasionally when they were unhappy with something. It was usually if they were unhappy with the program manager on this big project we had to develop a new grassroots industrial city on the Red Sea. There was nothing there. I mean, there was no utilities, there was no water supply, there was no power. We had to start with bare sagebrush and seashore to start building a new town, a new city, with industrial sites for refineries and chemical plants and so forth. and it was the terminus of a pipeline across the country. But anyway, there was continual negotiations going on, and we did make the mistake of putting a couple of people in there as project managers, and it was a long-term project, and we couldn't expect anybody to spend their whole half their life, working life there. But so people would go over there on a 3 or 4 year contract, and sometimes they'd have personality conflicts with their Saudi counterparts and so forth. So I would get a call, and I'd have to go in and listen to the Saudi officials' complaint, and then try to not argue with him, but really find out what's bothering him, and then we'd have to find somebody else. And that was illuminating, because they thought they could actually. This one Saudi chief thought he could influence U.S. politics by having me go tell President Reagan that he's got to be as friendly to the Saudis as he is to Israel. And I said, well,
Big order.
yeah. Well, how am I going to do that? But
So were you friends with Reagan?
no. I did have an answer, and that was that you may not know it, but the Jewish or Israeli anyway, the big a big political force, because they give a lot of money to Americans, give a lot of money to the political process, and Saudi Arabia doesn't do that. So you got to get a lobbying group and a fundraising group started in the United States and give some political clout. That's how Reagan became a strong supporter of Israel. And he thought a minute and he said, well, okay, you'll get your paycheck Monday. Because there was a large cash flow on that project, and we were getting a big check supposed to get it every, I think, 2 weeks. And it was in the millions of dollars for progress payments and so forth. So we got that in the bank quickly, and then we made enough money off of a couple of 3 days it was in the bank, and before it got dispersed, the interest on that paid all the expenses of the office in Jeddah, staff and so forth. So, let's see, I could go on for hours, but I won't this morning, but any
Is Parsons still a
questions?
private company? You said they were when you started. Did they go public at some point?
Yes, they went public in the 70s. and they were on the American Stock Exchange, and they moved over to the New York Stock Exchange, and then it was recognized that engineering companies who have these long-term projects and they have to replenish their work periodically or lay people off and that sort of thing, aren't particularly complementary to the system, where it's quarterly returns, on the business, and so then somebody got the idea, wonderful idea, of let's convert Parsons to an employee stock ownership company, and so they did. Took out some big loans, bought all the shares of the company that were on the stock market, and distributed those, reformatted, of course. We've redistributed those to the employees on a formula basis. Every year we got no retirement contribution from Parsons, and they had no pension plan by then. I had a little one. It was when Ralph Parsons was proprietor, but then they took the they gave stock every year to people depending on their performance evaluation, their salary, and I guess their longevity with the company. And so, my service, my residency in Saudi Arabia for 3 years put a great extra amount of money in my salary, and it was so I got a big boost in my retirement funds through the stock. So when I retired, when I reached 65, I was able to take out my stock.
Is that similar to what Bechtel and Burns and Rowe did?
I don't know about Bechtel. I don't know about Burns and Rowe either.
Were they your main competitors?
Bechtel was our main competitor, yeah. But I don't know, as far as I remember, when I was face to face with Bechtel a lot, they were still owned by the Bechtel family foundation, I think. And that's the last I heard.
When that guy parachuted or was shot out from 4,700 feet or
47,000.
47,000, you said he was a colonel. Was it unusual for a colonel to be doing that, somebody that high a rank?
He was a lieutenant colonel, but he was he was from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and it was a special project of his, and he was in charge of the project, and so he
Said, I'll do it.
yeah.
They were highly experienced because of all the years that they had flown special planes and all that. So that's why you see a relatively high rank.
But do you have to have rank to jump out of a plane?
No.
You know, there's a certain amount of risk there, okay?
Yeah, that's why you wouldn't want a high-ranking guy in there.
And that's what you pay for the risk.
Oh, okay.
Forrest, you mentioned one time before about the problems that they put on you in Saudi Arabia about hiring local princes and so forth.
Well, I don't. Yeah, they had the custom of, I don't know, I don't know who started it, but we had lots of young Saudis on our payroll. They weren't necessarily princes, but they were on our payroll for training and development, and some of them were sharp, eager, most of them were not. Most of them just said, this is my pension. Paid to kind of sit around and watch other people work.
Did you have any women in the office in Saudi?
No, not when I was there. The company was cited with a violation because they had the wife of an English engineer in the corporate office. She was a secretary, office manager type. But this was just before my tour there, and came in and said she can't be there anymore. And she's got to leave right now. We did have, they had rules, and they weren't terribly oppressive. I did not think that you couldn't do anything with a religious inclination to it there. Couldn't put up a Christmas tree. You couldn't send Christmas cards. You couldn't do any proselytizing and religious proselytizing. And we'd hired some Mormons for this big new city project, and they were told that they could not do have any religious activities there. But unfortunately, they ignored that, and they were raided one night in one of the senior managers' home. Found all kinds of Latter-day Saints literature under in boxes under the bed. They'd been handing out to people, and the men in that little clique of Mormons who were on our payroll were all ordered to be at the airport within 4 hours. And you're going out. And they escorted the Saudis. Of course, we got them to the airport. Escorted them to make sure they all went out on the plane. And then they gave the women and children that were there with them 4 days to pack up their stuff and get out. The men were booed and gone.
Do you have any language problems, or do you all speak all English, or?
Yeah. I was dealing with educated Saudis who had been the guy I worked for on the Saudi side of the joint venture. He had a master's degree in business from Harvard, and then a PhD in business finance, I think, from Stanford. And nearly everybody at the level management or governance in Saudi Arabia that I would deal with spoke near perfect English.
How many years did you live overseas or out of the United States?
Just about 3.
Just, okay.
I had been I traveled extensively before and after that.
It's just a Saudi experience where you lived over there.
Is where I lived there for 3 years.
Did
Talk about
Parsons
this.
ever get involved in the disposal of nuclear material?
Yes, that's what and that was kind of a outgrowth from
Yeah.
chemical weapons.
Sure.
And we developed a lot of technology about the control of hazardous materials, a lot of knowledge about that technology, and so
What do you think about the situation now with trying to get rid of all of this chemical weapons that they've got there in Iran and
Syria.
Syria. Yeah. Well, I think that I think they should get rid of it, and I don't know if I think all these plants in the United States have been mothballed, but I don't know for sure. I've been away from Parsons for 30,
What methods
30
do
years.
they have to get rid of it? Some of that stuff I've heard is very difficult to neutralize.
Yeah. Well, they could build a plant, along the lines of the one at Johnson & Co., or they could transport them to, if that plant is still there, and if it's been mothballed properly, that would be a good place to dispose of it. Now, that would mean we'd have to,
But you didn't-
get
you
in the
didn't-
act, huh?
You didn't have the political dimension that comes in here, because,
No.
the Russians might have some object, I would think,
Yeah, well, it may be,
to the most sensible solution.
but I think we as a country should give the Russians plans or,
Yeah.
ship them some of the machinery that was in this plant or
That's a
something
good
like
idea.
that. And let them find a place to put it.
So you really have a good political understanding as well as an engineering understanding, and that was critical in what I'm hearing you say about to your success in Saudi and I mean, how quickly you just figured that one out. That's pretty amazing.
I've waited many years to meet a person who's responsible for designing airports. Why do we walk so far? I've been to Dallas Fort Worth, I've been to other airports, and I mean, unless we want to get a hitched ride on a little electric car, they walk us forever and
They
ever.
got
Are
the
you
moving-
responsible for this?
Moving sidewalks.
Well, one contract we got in this airport group at Parsons was to write a contract from FAA to write a manual of how to design an airport. And it went into all of the trade-offs between efficiency, cost of operation, walking distance, walking time, and so forth. And we searched the industry and databases for ideas that have been put forward. And one of them was put in the manual as a example of what could be done to make it easy on the passenger, but not practical in the real sense, was to put the passengers in a container with seats and everything and windows, and then you just take that up, slide it onto the airframe, hold it down, and after you've slid the incoming went off, and then you could get rid of the waiting room and process the people that could be sitting there.
On this Johnson Island plant that was equipped to destroy all kinds of weapons, you mentioned it included destruction of chemical weapons. Did we have chemical weapons in World War II?
Yeah,
We did. What were they?
Sarinid and
Really?
Yeah.
We used those in the Pacific War? Or the,
yeah, I guess they call them, well, we didn't use them.
didn't use
We never used them, but they were there, and they were distributed around the, I guess we were prepared to use them on Japan if they used them on us. But
Yeah, I think Roosevelt and Churchill agreed early in the war, based on their World War I experiences, that they just were not going to permit them.
But they'd be ready if they needed to be.
And they were, well, you can't ignore them, because once something exists, it can't be ignored.
Forrest, do you know if Parsons was involved in the design of the new airports in Beijing and oh, come on, what
Shanghai.
city?
Well, we never did.
Those airports have a similarity in design to Hong Kong, with the underground railroad that connects the terminals. And
Yeah. Well, when I was with Parsons, we did no work in mainland China. Well, I take that back. We did do a master plan for a little airport fairly close to Hong Kong, but over the border into mainland China.
Shanghai and Beijing have two of the finest airports, I think, in the world. They're just outstanding.
I always thought the ideal airport would be like a central, donut figure with an open atrium. And all the transportation of people would be underground to either car parking or trams or trains. And above the parking area would be all the airstrips for the planes. And the planes would come in like a bunch of bees nestled around the outer perimeter of the donut.
Yeah.
And there'd be several higher layers of the terminal, 3 or 4 floors, and the planes could come in at different levels to take on passengers. And then the central area would be so compact that the passengers could go across the donut to other terminals.
Forrest, why did they throw that idea out?
Well, there's something similar
Charles
in
de Gaulle
Charles de
is
Gaulle in
yeah.
Paris.
See, that's right. That's what I was going to say, that it's a matter of scale. You could get too much centralized into one place. And the idea of stacking the levels for the plane parking, that there'd be all kinds of fire and fire hazard, firefighting things to go with that, but and some other safety things. Plus, you gotta, airplanes are not light, and so you've got to get them up and down to those different levels.
But what I'm saying is that some ramps would come in at the highest level, where others would come in at the next lowest, and there would be staggered levels, not all stacked up one on top of the other.
That's a great idea, but you should have been an engineer.
Well, I knew I
But I
couldn't know.
liked his idea of putting the people in containers. You fly over a city and just drop them like a bomb.
And then you get one woman with a heart attack in the pod, and she's got to be gotten off.
There's only one big problem with any of those things, is you've got too many people that come in singly in cars. Where to park all those cars? That's the biggest problem, is parking spaces for the cars. Now the latest ones that they've come up with is they've got a self-parking garage And they've got several of them now around the country now, where they can park 750 cars. All you do is you just pull up, take a ticket, they take the car off, the car goes off on a ramp. They're stuck up in a hotel, like a hotel, up and down about 7 or 8 stories high.
Pigeonholes.
And you go back in, you give them the ticket, you wait for 10 minutes, and here comes your car out again. But the parking
If you're
is
lucky,
a
you get
thing.
the same car back.
Yeah,
So they have the same thing for bicycles in
Yeah.
Tokyo.
Might get a better one.
yeah.
But the thing is, isn't it, you can plan the best airport imaginable, considering everything.
Yeah.
Then you got people running the airport.
You know, the maddening thing in my travels in a lot of different airports, I don't care where I'm going, but from where I check in, I walk past all of these entrances to other airplanes, and my airplane is one way.
I had experience at Dallas Fort Worth. We were sitting at the gate, and they said that they changed the gate, and it's another satellite. So we went all the way over there, and we get there,
They changed it
and we
again.
sit down, and then they announced that the plane that was there that was supposed to move was jammed in the gate. So we had to go back.
That happens
Started
in
from.
Miami all the time.
Dallas is one of the worst ones for that.
Now you know who to blame, though.
Vic Clay, who you may know, who lives here, spent a lot of time in Saudi Arabia for an oil company. And he talked about these communities where all the American workers had to live.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, there's no alcohol permitted in Saudi Arabia, but he said almost all the people in these communities had their own still.
Right.
And was that true in your experience with your people?
That's, I heard.
You heard that.
How many tents did you go in and out of when you were in there?
Yeah, how large was yours?
My tent? No. We had a houseboy who, he kind of came with the villa, and he'd been there through 3 other managing directors ahead of me, but he had the reputation of being the best winemaker in all of Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
Was your wife with you all the time in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah. Well, not
Most of the time.
She took her a while to get her visa straightened out, and so she got there about 3 months after I.
If she went out, did she have to wear a thing on her head?
No, not in Jeddah. Jeddah was more liberal than the 3 other big cities in Saudi Arabia, but they had, she had to wear, long sleeve dresses or a blouse and shirt, and she had to have skirt down to her ankles, but she didn't have to wear a headdress.
In those Saudis that you trained or worked with, did you ever run across Osama bin Laden?
Well, I drove by his father's villa every day, going to and from.
Well, his family is one of the really rich ones in Saudi Arabia, right? But what does he do? What is
Construction.
it? Family business?
Construction. He did bin Laden construction.
And they're still there.
Yeah, they're still there. But he was not a survivor. I mean, bin Laden himself was not Osama was not a favored son.
Forrest, I think you've excited enough imagination here. We could keep you busy all morning, but I think you've done a wonderful job of sharing with us, and we've been amply rewarded with our attendance this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.